Best Team for Scarlet and Violet will be out this Sunday, December 11th at 10 a.m. Eastern / 7 a.m. Pacific, so make sure you all save the date. You're not going to want to miss it. Hey guys, so I just covered what I felt were the top 10 strongest Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. But what about the weakest Pokemon? In today's video, I want to look into the top 10 weakest Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet from a competitive standpoint. If you enjoyed the content and want to see more Pokemon Scarlet and Violet top 10s, make sure you leave a like on today's video and use that subscribe button for more content like this. These of course are just my opinions, but make sure you also comment your lists down below so I can see what you think are the top 10 weakest Pokemon in these games. With that said, let's get started. Starting off our list at number 10, we have a classic terrible Pokemon, Sudowoodo. Sudowoodo is a rather unimpressive Pokemon as far as fully evolved standards, due to its pure rock typing as well as its incredibly low speed stat. While Sudowoodo definitely got a fun buff this gen through options such as Trail Blaze to boost its speed, as well as Spikes in order to give Sudowoodo a second form of hazards, Sudowoodo still managed to find its way onto our list today. Despite all the aforementioned disadvantages Sudowoodo provides to a team, its biggest flaw would be how it still somehow manages a poor 410 base stat total. For a Pokemon with one of the worst single typings, as well as such a low speed and special defense stat, Sudowoodo struggles to hang on to relevance in modern generations. The only reason Sudowoodo manages to land itself at only number 10 would be due to the fact you can pair Sturdy with heavy duty boots in order to avoid your opponent's hazards from breaking Sturdy. Though there's still plenty of options such as Bullet Seed to get around this. Overall, despite Sudowoodo's buffs, it just barely avoids finally leaving the worst Pokemon list in Generation 9. Maybe Generation 10 will be kinder to Sudowoodo. Our ninth entry on today's list comes in the form of Hypno. While Hypno has nothing too awful about it at face value, it's a collection of rather mediocre rolls it provides that lands Hypno at number 9. In the case of Sudowoodo, I can think of one role that it genuinely would provide to a team, being a designated hazards lead that you could utilize to guarantee at least a single set of hazards. This role for a bottom tier mon would probably be unique to Sudowoodo and Carbink, with Sudowoodo at least being a more offensive option. For Hypno, I really can't think of any role it actually has over low tier psychics. There's plenty of other lower tier psychics that get similar support roles, such as Wish or Trick Room, that Hypno also would provide while having stats better suited for these roles. Hypno has 3 rather useless abilities, being Insomnia, Forewarn, and Inner Focus, with Inner Focus being the most valuable of the 3. Besides its special defense at 115, Hypno has pretty lackluster stats, with the majority sitting at around base 70. The only advantage Hypno has, besides a strong psychic type, would truly be in its vast move pool. However, with Hypno's move pool mostly coming from its wide range of coverage and setup, it sadly lacks a strong way to deal damage to opponents due to both its offenses being rather weak. Hypno suffers from the massive power creep that Generation 9 provided, while also receiving a lack of buffs in comparison to other similarly valuable Pokemon. Moving into our number 8 worst Pokemon, we have another Gen 2 mon, Pluff. Generation 2 had a lot of pretty awful Pokemon competitively, and Pluff is no exception. Pluff was given 3 new moves in this gen, being Tailwind, Dazzling Gleam, and Pollen Puff. However, these are not enough to save Pluff from being mentioned today. While these do help Pluff actually from a potentially niche support role thanks to Tailwind and Pollen Puff especially, I do think that the lack of an ability such as Prankster to help these moves become more consistent hurts Pluff's potential to be a viable Pokemon. Pluff's biggest weakness comes from the grass and flying typing. While it's certainly not alone in terms of this awful defensive typing, it's definitely the weakest option among this type. With mediocre bulk, as well as base 55 in both of its offenses, it's no wonder Pluff struggles to put up a fight. Even with Terrastall, you can't really save Pluff in competitive due to how awful its stats are outside of speed. The best scenario if you're using Pluff would be that your opponent ignores you until you use Strength Sap enough times to weaken your opponent's physical attack stat to -6, and then hope they can't sufficiently damage you anymore. Speaking of Pokemon with awful dual typings, at number 7, we have none other than Vespaquin. While there certainly are worse Pokemon with this typing as a whole, Scarlet and Violet actually cut a lot of these candidates such as Ladian and Mothim, making Vespaquin the new worst bug and flying Pokemon in the game. Pokemon has tried its hands at buffing Vespaquin through the past 2 generations now, between additions such as Heavy Duty Boots and Toxic Spikes in Generation 8, as well as regular spikes in Generation 9, and yet this Pokemon still remains borderline unusable in competitive Pokemon. One of Vespaquin's biggest flaws comes from its dual typing being bug and flying. This typing offers practically nothing defensively or offensively that benefits either individual typing. In addition to this, Vespaquin also is basically required to run heavy duty boots, or it takes a whopping 50% from stealth rocks every time you enter the field. With recovery moves also being nerfed to 8 PP at most this generation, Vespaquin has a significantly harder time recovering past this if you were to lose your boots at any point in a match. Though, in all honesty, with Rock being such a common coverage option, most teams can just Rock Slide Vespaquin and one-hit KO it without a second thought before it even manages to land a single attack. Going in the number 6, we actually finally managed to go over our first new Pokemon, being Wugtrio. Wugtrio being one of 3 new Pokemon on today's list just really goes to show how good a job Pokemon did at power creeping previous generations this time around. Despite not being the worst pure water type on today's list, Wugtrio ends up being the inferior Dugtrio in every way in competitive. With the measly base 100 attack, Wugtrio is basically required to utilize either Terrastall or a Choice Band in order to do sufficient damage to teams. Wugtrio's coverage is limited to water, ground, dark, and normal as far as physical attacks go. So good luck doing sufficient damage to grass types without Terra Blast, plus a super effective typing for them. Another area where Wugtrio is severely lacking is in terms of its abilities. Dugtrio at least managed to have a terrifying ability in the form of Arena Trap. However, Wugtrio manages to peak with Gooey of all abilities. While this ability isn't bad in any sense, it's far more useful on a Pokemon that has actual bulk. Wugtrio is lucky to take a Thunder Shock, let alone a truly strong attack, due to its defenses being 35 HP, 50 defense, and 70 special defense. Wugtrio is probably one of the worst pure water typings we've received in a while. However, it still somehow isn't the worst one we have this generation. Starting off the top half of our list today, we're going over our second bug type, Kricketune. Kricketune proves to still be a pretty abysmal option this gen for all the same reasons as previous ones. When your highest attack stat is base 85, with most of your stats hovering around base 50, it's pretty hard to genuinely justify your value in competitive. When you also factor in that Kricketune is a pure bug type Pokemon, it only makes Kricketune's fate as a truly awful Pokemon even more sealed. The best thing favoring Kricketune would probably be the fact that it can utilize Technician to boost the damage of moves such as Bug Bite and Aerial Ace, and how Kricketune is one of 3 fully evolved Pokemon with Sticky Webs this generation. Kricketune is easily one of the worst bug types imaginable, and this generation did nothing to actually even attempt to improve this. While Pokemon such as Vespaquin suffer from a worse defensive typing, at least Vespaquin actually attempts to have strong stats in its defenses to make up for this. Kricketune can't offer a high speed stat, actual defenses, or anything of note to actually allow itself to even land a single move in battle without holding the Focus Sash. Kricketune continues to prove the stigma behind early route bug types being outright unusable on teams in competitive Pokemon, despite not being the worst option we'll go over today. Going into our 4th worst Pokemon, we'll discuss our second new Pokemon today, being Toedscruel. Toedscruel is truly only on our list today due to how bad its signature ability, Mycelium Might, is for a Pokemon with so much strong utility. Despite having so many strong status moves such as Leech Seed, Dual Screens, Spore, Toxic, Dual Spikes, and even Trick Room, it somehow manages to struggle to utilize any of these moves of success. This is because Mycelium Might requires Toedscruel moves last in its priority bracket whenever you utilize any of these moves in competitive. Despite guaranteeing you'll land these moves, the negatives severely outweigh the benefits of a 100% accuracy status option. If Toedscruel had at least a stronger defensive typing, such as a pure ground or grass typing, you could maybe at least make the case for Toedscruel avoiding our list today. But thanks to this typing, you now add a ×4 ice weakness to Toedscruel unless you waste a Terrasteel on such an otherwise lackluster Pokemon. With ice being one of the most common coverage options, you'll truly struggle to even successfully utilize any of your status move pool, as your opponent will likely have a strong super effective move to attack you with. To top it off, Toedscruel was gifted with a strong base 100 speed stat, which it will sadly almost never even get to use against teams. This was honestly the biggest slap in the face this Mon was given this gen. Moving on to our third worst Pokemon, we have our last new Pokemon this gen, Spydops. Spydops suffers from yet again an extremely low set of stats, as well as the highly unimpressive pure bug typing. While Kricketune at least has a speed stat in the 60s, Spydops suffers from a horrid base 35 speed stat. Despite having more utility than Kricketune, such as Taunt and Memento, what's the point if you're so slow that you won't even outpace most walls this gen that can just taunt you first? It has a really impressive move pool with options such as Leech Life, Memento, U-Turn, Sticky Webs, First Impression, and even strong coverage with Brick Break and Low Kick for common bug switch-ins. I think if Spydops was able to have the bug and fighting type, we could even potentially see it avoiding this list altogether due to a strong offensive typing while losing its weakness to Stealth Rocks. In tandem with its ability Stakeout, this could have been a legitimately strong low-tier Pokemon for teams. Instead, we were given another pure bug type that will forever lay in the depths of unviable Pokemon in the competitive for Generation 9. Going into our runner-up today, we have the weakest pure water-type Pokemon in the game, Luvdisc. Luvdisc is probably one of the weakest Pokemon in the entire National Dex if I'm being honest. However, it manages to only secure a second place spot on today's list. Luvdisc not only manages to have pitiful defenses with base 43 HP, 55 defense, and 65 special defense, but it also can't even manage to be a good offensive water type either. Keep in mind, water types typically prefer to be defensive, but even as far as offense goes, Luvdisc's stronger offense only reaches base 40 in special attack. The only actually useful thing about Luvdisc would come from its base 97 speed and the ability Swift Swim. Thanks to Swift Swim, you can honestly use this on a rain team if you're feeling sadistic enough to use Luvdisc, and invest very little speed in order to maybe boost your damage output a bit more. If nothing else, Luvdisc's base 40 special attack at least is making Special Wugtrio look a little bit more viable, as Wugtrio at least has a base 50 special attack stat. Despite how terrible Luvdisc was oriented though, it somehow failed at even being the absolute worst Pokemon this gen, due to a single Pokemon that returned from the depths of Pokemon Home in Scarlet and Violet. Finally, the weakest Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. We have none other than one of the weakest Pokemon of all time, Sunflora. Sunflora is a pure grass type with chlorophyll, which honestly doesn't seem too bad on paper. Sunflora manages to actually utilize strong coverage options such as Earth Power, Sludge Bomb, and Dazzling Gleams in order to manage common checks to grass types, and it even has a respectable base 105 special attack stat. So why is Sunflora somehow falling below even Luvdisc of all Pokemon? The biggest thing plaguing Sunflora would be its terrible base 30 speed. Even with the Sun Up, while utilizing a 252 speed EV set and a timid nature, you can't even outspeed base 110 Pokemon such as Espeon of all things. Sunflora isn't exactly a bulky Pokemon either, sporting an average bulk set of 75 HP, 55 defense, and 85 special defense. Sunflora isn't exactly frail, but it's not bulky enough to justify this low speed stat either. While Luvdisc can't deal a lot of damage with its moves, at least it's fast enough to actually even get an attempt to deal damage, which sadly isn't a luxury that Sunflora has. While I genuinely think you could make a case for Sunflora or Luvdisc being the weakest Pokemon these games have to offer, at the very least, I think it's clear these two are pretty unrivaled as far as the weakest fully evolved Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet go, even being worse than a fair amount of unevolved Pokemon. So that's my list for the top 10 weakest Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. If you guys have a different list than the one I have, make sure you comment your top 10 weakest Pokemon this gen in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to remember to leave a like on the vid and use that subscribe button to stay up to date on all future Scarlet and Violet top 10s. Thanks for watching the video and for coming through and enjoying Scarlet and Violet with me. We've got so much content coming surrounding Gen 9 through the end of the year and beyond, including the top 10 strongest Pokemon, the best team for the games, and much more. If you're interested in more Mystic content, check out my TikTok and Mystic Umbreon Shorts YouTube channel. When we get to 5,000 subs on the channel, we're going to have a new series related to Scarlet and Violet that will be exclusive to there, so go subscribe. Also, if you're into fanfictions or Genshin Impact, check out Mystic Reads and Tybotchinary. I offer a ton of creative spoken word content over there, and I do a bunch of theories and lore videos surrounding Genshin Impact. So come join me over there at that float your boat. That's all for now. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time for more Scarlet and Violet content.